My name is Riley. I was born in Miami, where the air always feels like it's sweating hot, heavy, and restless. People come here chasing light, sunlight, limelight, nightlife, but I grew up in the shadows. My earliest memories are of sound, bass from passing cars, waves hitting the seawall, my mother's voice yelling at men who never stayed. She worked at a bar on Ocean Drive, nights that bled into mornings. When she came home, the smell of smoke and rum followed her like perfume. My father? I never knew which one of her boyfriends he was supposed to be. She used to say, "You're my little miracle," but she said it with tired eyes, as if miracles were a burden. By the time I was 7, I had learned how to pour myself a bowl of cereal, walk myself to school, and pretend I didn't hear her crying through the bathroom door. Our apartment was small, one fan, 2 rooms, and too many ghosts, but outside, Miami glittered like temptation itself. Neon and palm trees, gold chains and fake smiles. I thought if I could just get close enough to the light, maybe it would make me clean too. When I was 12, my mother's new boyfriend moved in. He brought gifts, sneakers, candy, a pink phone I wasn't allowed to use in public. At first, I thought he was the first man who actually saw me. Then I learned that some kinds of attention feel like drowning. He used to whisper things like, "You're so mature for your age," as if that made what he did less wrong. I stopped sleeping with the door closed after that. I told my mother once, in the softest voice I could find. She slapped me so hard I tasted blood and said, "Don't ever say that again. You ruin us." That was the night I understood love could be violent too. When I was 14, I started spending nights at a friend's house, a girl named Mia who lived closer to the beach. Her mom worked at a hotel and didn't ask questions. We'd sit on the sand and watch tourists stumble out of bars, laughing, glowing with money. I used to imagine what it felt like to be wanted for something other than silence. By 16, I was working at a diner, cleaning tables until my hands cracked. Men twice my age would flirt, leave tips folded under their plates like promises. One night, a woman came in, red lips, long nails, perfume that made the whole room turn its head. She sat at the counter and watched me wipe down glasses. "You ever get tired of scraping by?" she asked. I didn't answer, but she wrote her number on a napkin and slid it toward me. Underneath, she wrote one word: opportunity. 2 weeks later, I met her at a hotel in Brickell. She told me she was an entertainer, that she saw clients who liked to invest in beauty. She said I had the kind of face that could make a man believe in God for 5 minutes. I was 17, half curious, half starving, for money, for validation, for escape. She introduced me to a photographer, a makeup artist, a driver who handled bookings. They told me everything would be safe, professional, easy. They lied. The first night, my hands shook so hard I spilled champagne on the client's shirt. He laughed, called me adorable, and told me not to worry. Everyone's nervous their first time. I remember staring at the city lights through the hotel window, wondering if anyone else could see how fast my heart was dying. After that, I told myself it was just work, a transaction, a performance. If I could smile long enough, maybe I'd earn the life I used to dream about. I bought my mother a new phone, paid her rent for 3 months. She didn't ask where the money came from. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't care. By 19, I had my own place, a 1-bedroom in Midtown, floor-to-ceiling windows, white furniture I never sat on. I started calling what I did high-end companionship. It sounded cleaner than the truth. Men flew me to New York, the Bahamas, Dubai. I learned how to pack my sadness into designer luggage and call it independence. But at night, when the city was quiet and the ocean hummed against the shore. By 22, I was living in a condo that smelled like coconut candles and ocean breeze, the kind of place people dream about when they think of Miami. Glass walls, white sheets, balcony view of the bay, but inside, it felt hollow. Every time I opened the fridge, there was food I didn't want. Every time I looked in the mirror, there was a girl I didn't know. I told myself I was in control. I chose the clients. I set the price. I booked the flights. But control can be just another kind of cage when you decorate it with luxury. There was one man, Victor. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of charm that feels practiced. He said he didn't want just another girl. He wanted someone to talk to. Someone who listened. So I listened. To his stories about business deals. His wife who didn't understand him. His daughter who reminded him of me. He paid for my rent. My car, my silence. He said, "You make me feel alive again." I smiled and said, "That's what you're paying for." But sometimes after he left, I'd sit on the edge of the bed and whisper it back to myself, hoping it would sound true. People think this life is about sex. It's not. It's about pretending. About creating a fantasy that makes someone else forget who they are, while you forget yourself in the process. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. I told myself it was temporary. But the truth is, you can lose pieces of your soul one transaction at a time. There were good nights too. Nights when I'd stand on a balcony in another city, wearing silk and holding a glass of champagne, watching the skyline sparkle like it was applauding me. In those moments, I'd think, maybe I made it. Then I'd go back to my hotel room, wipe off my makeup, and see the same tired eyes I'd been hiding since I was 12. One evening, Victor asked me to fly with him to the Keys, just for the weekend, he said. No work, just us. We stayed at a private villa. Ocean waves whispering against the shore. He cooked dinner or tried to, and for a few hours, I almost believed it was real. When he fell asleep, I walked outside barefoot. The sand was cool, the moon low and heavy. I thought about what it might feel like to just keep walking. Into the dark, into the water, until the sound of the world disappeared. But I didn't. I went back inside, crawled into bed, and pretended to dream. When I turned 23, my mother called. I hadn't heard her voice in years. She said she needed money, hospital bills. She claimed. I sent it without asking questions. Guilt is a strange currency. No matter how much you pay, the balance never clears. Around that time, a photographer I knew offered me a chance to model for a magazine. Something tasteful, he said. I went, thinking it might be a step towards something new. But when I got there, it wasn't a studio. It was a rented house, music playing, men drinking. I felt the old fear rise in my throat, but I stayed anyway, too polite, too used to pretending everything was fine. They took pictures. I never approved. The next day, one of them was online. My inbox flooded. Men, offers, threats. That's when I realized, no matter how careful you are, the world always finds new ways to take pieces of you. I stopped going out for a while, closed the blinds, deleted numbers. Victor called. I didn't answer. He left messages, first kind, then angry, then silent. When silence comes from someone who used to control you, it feels like peace. I thought about quitting. I even applied for a job at a boutique. Minimum wage, long hours, no glamour. The manager looked at my resume and said, "You've had some interesting experience." I smiled, but inside I wanted to scream. How do you explain to someone that your work history is a list of nights you survived? By then, I had started drinking more, just a glass at first. After clients left, then two, then whole bottles, because sometimes sleep only comes when the world blurs. I'd wake up with lipstick on the pillow and no memory of how I got there. My therapist, the one I finally started seeing, said I had trauma, repetition, that I kept reenacting my own abuse by letting men pay to touch what was once taken. I hated her for saying that, mostly because it was true. One night, I met a man named Lee. By the time I turned 26, I was living two lives, one in daylight, one after dark. Daylight, Riley went to the gym, posted filtered photos, smiled at baristas who knew her name. Nighttime, Riley lived in hotel elevators, rode in strangers' cars, and came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. People always say, "You look amazing." I did. That was the problem. It's easy to hide the cracks when you shine just enough to blind people. The truth is, I was falling apart. The panic attacks started in elevators, small spaces, mirrors, the hum of metal. It all felt like the nights I used to lock myself in the bathroom as a kid, waiting for the footsteps to stop. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. Then it became everything. Malls, airports, even the shower. My heart would start racing, hands shaking, vision narrowing until the world looked like it was underwater. I'd bite my lip until it bled just to prove I was still here. Drugs helped. So did pretending. I told myself I was just having a rough patch. I told my clients I was fine. Told my mother I was busy. Told myself I could stop anytime. I couldn't. One night, I was booked at a hotel in downtown Miami. An event, high profile, quick cash. The client was polite at first. Then the questions started. How old were you when you first did this? Did your dad ever see you like this? Do you like being used? I froze. The room felt smaller, the walls breathing. He grabbed my wrist and said, "Don't pretend you're innocent." That's when something inside me snapped, not loud, not violent, just final. I remember leaving without my shoes. The city lights blurred as I ran to my car. When I got home, I showered for an hour, skin burning, water running cold. Then I sat on the floor and screamed a sound that had been waiting 20 years to be heard. The next morning, I couldn't move. Every sound hurt. The sunlight through the blinds felt like a blade. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to exist anymore. Eli called. We hadn't spoken in months. He heard something in my voice and came over. When he walked in, the apartment was dark except for the glow of the TV, playing the same commercial on loop. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside me, held my hand, and whispered, "You're scaring me." That was the first time I went to the hospital. They called it an overdose. But it wasn't deliberate. Too many pills, too little sleep, too much silence. The nurse asked, "Do you have anyone we can call?" I said, "No one who still believes me." I stayed there for days. The walls were white, the sheets rough, the air full of disinfectant. At night, I could hear the woman in the next bed, talking to herself, whispers that sounded like prayers or apologies, maybe both. A psychiatrist visited me on the second day. She had kind eyes and a voice like calm water. She asked, "When did you stop feeling safe?" I said, "I don't think I ever started." She wrote something on her clipboard and said, "That's where we'll begin." Therapy wasn't magic. It was war between the person I pretended to be and the one who kept begging to be seen. At first, I said nothing, then too much. Memories spilled out like broken glass. My stepfather's hand, my mother's denial. The first time I sold a lie and called it empowerment. I hated every minute of it, but I kept going. When I was discharged, I promised the doctor I'd try. She smiled, like she'd heard that 1,000 times before. I went home, threw away every pill bottle I owned, and poured the wine down the sink. For 3 days, when I turned 30, I thought the worst was behind me. I had been sober for almost 2 years. I had a small apartment with paint-stained walls and a cat that followed me everywhere. I had work, real work, photographing local artists and writing short pieces about their shows. And for the first time, I didn't flinch when people touched my shoulder. Then, out of nowhere, came the message, "Your mother's sick. She's asking for you." I stared at the text for a long time. The word mother still felt foreign, like a language I used to speak but had forgotten. I hadn't seen her in 15 years, not since the police took me out of that house, and she looked at me like I had ruined her life. But something in me, maybe pity, maybe unfinished business, told me to go. The hospital was in Fort Lauderdale, just a short drive from Miami, but it felt like crossing decades. When I walked into her room, the air was heavy with the smell of antiseptic and wilted flowers. She was smaller than I remembered. Gray hair, hollow cheeks, eyes that darted away the second they met mine. "Hi, Mom," I said softly. She blinked, then whispered, "Riley?" Her voice cracked like an old record. For a while, neither of us spoke. Machines beeped around us, counting time. We didn't know how to fill. Then she said, "You look good." I nodded. "You too." It was a lie, but it was the only language we still shared. Polite lies that held back the flood. I wanted to ask her everything. Why she didn't protect me. Why she stayed with him. Why she told the police I was confused. That I made it all up. But the words stuck in my throat. She looked so fragile. I almost believed she hadn't done anything wrong. The nurse came in, adjusted her and smiled at me. "Your daughter's been talking about you," she said. I wanted to say, "You must have the wrong person." But then my mother reached for my hand. Her skin was cool, paper thin. "I didn't know how to love you right," she said quietly. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough, but it was some. The Florida sun doesn't care about your grief. It burns the same for everyone. I drove home with the windows down, music loud, tears streaming down my face, not out of sadness, but release. For 30 years, I had carried her silence like a second skin, and in that moment, I finally began to shed it. Over the next few weeks, I visited her every Sunday. I brought flowers she never commented on, books she never read. Sometimes she was lucid. Sometimes she drifted between memories. She talked about my childhood like it belonged to someone else. "Remember the beach trips?" she'd say. I didn't. All I remembered was the basement, the door, the smell of fear, But I let her talk, because forgiveness, I was learning, isn't for the one who hurt you. It's for the one who's tired of holding the knife. She died in February. The nurse called at 3 a.m. I didn't cry right away. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, waiting to feel something. It came days later. Sudden. Title. Grief. Not for the mother I had, but for the one I needed. The funeral. A few distant relatives showed up, people who used to whisper about me at family gatherings. They hugged me like we'd been close, murmuring, "She loved you so much." I smiled politely, let them believe what they needed to. After the service, I walked to the ocean. The wind was warm, the sky a dull pink. I threw her hospital bracelet into the waves. For a moment, I watched it float, then sink, then disappear. That's how I chose to remember her, not as the woman who failed me, but as the one who was finally gone. When I came back to Miami, the silence was unbearable. I stopped painting, stopped answering calls, stopped going to therapy. I told everyone I was fine, but fine has always been. When I turned 35, I realized survival doesn't end, it just changes shape. The monsters that once lived in other people now lived quietly inside me, softer, older, tamed, but never gone. Some mornings, I still woke up with my heart racing for no reason. Other days, I laughed so hard my ribs ached. That's how healing works, it never arrives. It just visits and stays a little longer each time. By then, my apartment had become a small sanctuary, paint splatters on the walls, cameras on every surface, plants growing wild near the window. My cat, Luna, followed the sunlight from room to room like it was teaching me something. Maybe it was. I'd been teaching art therapy classes at a women's shelter for over a year. The first day I walked in, holding my sketchbook like a shield, I almost turned around. I wasn't sure I was strong enough to hold other people's stories when mine still echoed inside me. But the women looked up, eyes tired and kind, and I knew we didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to be there. We painted with our hands. No brushes, no rules, just color and touch and breath. Some women cried, some laughed, some sat in silence, tracing lines across the paper, like mapping the places pain had lived. When the session ended, one of them said, "You made the noise stop for a while." I smiled, because I knew exactly what she meant. That night, I came home to an email from a gallery in New York. They wanted to include my work in an exhibition called The Shape of Light. I stared at the screen for a long time, half disbelieving. The title felt like fate, the same name I'd given to my first painting after the hospital years ago. Back then, I had painted my damaged hand reaching toward the sun. Now, that same hand could hold a brush steady, not perfectly but steady enough. When I arrived in New York a few months later, the city felt like another lifetime. The air was cold, sharp with noise and ambition. The gallery was small but full of light. My photos hung on the far wall, a series called Bodies Remember. Each image showed fragments, a shoulder scar, a mouth mid-laugh, a pair of eyes looking straight into the camera. Not victims, survivors. When people asked me what the project meant, I said, it's about learning to exist after pain. During the opening, I caught my reflection in one of the glass frames. Older now, steadier, less afraid. For the first time, I didn't see the girl who was hurt or the woman who survived. I saw someone new, someone becoming. When I came back to Miami, the city felt softer. The air. That day, a journalist interviewed me for a local magazine. She asked, if you could speak to your younger self, what would you tell her? I thought for a long time before answering. I'd tell her that survival isn't strength, I said. It's tenderness, the kind that grows after the storm. A few months later, I had a dream. I was standing on the same beach from my childhood, the one I'd tried to forget. The ocean was calm, the sky pale gold. A little girl stood beside me, barefoot, curls tangled, eyes wide. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me waiting. I knelt down and whispered, "You were right to scream." Then she smiled and ran toward the water, fearless. When I woke up, I was crying. But it was the good kind, the kind that washes you clean. Now, most evenings, I paint by the window. Sometimes Luna curls up near the brushes. Sometimes I play music so soft it feels like breathing. My left hand still trembles when I work too long. But I've stopped seeing that as weakness. It's just proof that I kept going. I don't pray much anymore. But sometimes, before bed, I close my eyes and whisper thank you. Not to anyone, just to life, for letting me stay, for letting me change. The other day, I was walking home from class when a girl stopped me on the street. She said, "You don't remember me, but you came to the shelter last year. You told me to start painting again." I smiled. "Did you?" She nodded. "Yeah, and it helped." Then she hugged me quick, real, grateful. As she walked away, I realized something. I had become the person I once needed, and maybe that's all healing ever really is. Not the absence of pain, but the quiet knowing that your life, against all odds, became something beautiful. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window.